Welcome to Talking Jazz. My guest today is Don Was, man of many hats, which he likes to wear. We're going to chat today, focusing on the music and creating the music. So, welcome, Don.
Thank you so much. It's really good to see you.
And usually, I start out just giving everybody a little glimpse of who you are and where you come from. I know
Okay.
most don't need an introduction, but you never know.
We
And
should
we
definitely do one here.
Right. So and we chatted a little bit about Detroit. So give us in a nutshell, your roots and where you come from.
I come from Detroit, Michigan, which is a great music city and all styles of music, not just a great jazz city, although I think it's the best jazz city ever. When I was 14, I was driving around with my mom. She was making me run errands with her on a weekend, and I wanted to be hanging out at the mall with my friends. Yeah, 1966. Yeah. I was being just a rotten kid, just a terrible kid. So she finally just said, look, just stay in the car and here are the keys, play with the radio. So I started messing with the dial, and I didn't know that there was a jazz FM station in Detroit. I landed on the jazz station, and I came in just as they were playing a song that I later discovered was Mode for Joe by Joe Henderson, right? And if you go about 46 seconds into the start of his tenor solo, he starts out just making these anguished cries. It's like, whoa, man, I'd never heard that sound before, right? And it matched my mood that day. It matched my anguish at having to drive around with my mom and run errands. It really struck me. But then about 20 seconds after the solo starts, Joe Chambers, who's the drummer on that record, he kicks in and he starts swinging on that incredible ride cymbal of his that he still has, by the way, and still uses. And Joe Henderson like falls in line. He stops making anguish sounds. He stops the anguish cries and he falls in and he starts swinging, right? Really grooving. I felt like Joe Henderson was talking to me. I felt like he was saying, Don, you got to groove in the face of adversity. It wasn't those exact words, but that was the essence of what I picked up. There weren't even lyrics to it. It just was really speaking to me, and it changed my mood. I picked up on it right away, and by the time my mom got back to the car, I was a nice kid again, and I was aware that music had changed my mood 180 degrees. Over the next couple of years, I thought about that a lot. By the time I was in my 20s, kind of the same thing happened with another Blue Note record that was called Speak No Evil by Wayne Short.
Oh.
That one used to get me through college. I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan to go to University of Michigan. But at that time, if you wanted to be in the music school, you either played in the orchestra or you weren't in the music school. They didn't have a jazz program. They didn't have an electronic music program. You couldn't study music business and you couldn't learn engineering. They didn't have a recording studio. And I didn't want to be in an orchestra. In retrospect, as a bass player, I wish I'd have stayed in school and not dropped out because I had access to some incredible teachers. I could have saved myself about 30 years of struggle on the bass if I'd have learned some good technique in 1970. I dropped out of school. I wanted to join a band like the MC5 or the Stooges, who were popular Detroit bands that had this kind of raw energy to them. The only gig I could find was like doing covers of Carpenter songs in a bowling alley in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I would get lost. I had a girlfriend who was way more than I could handle at 19. I wasn't prepared for it. I kind of lost my way after a few months of that. What I do to get re-centered is I go back to the room in the apartment where I was living, and I put on side 2 of Speak No Evil, and I could hear it. I'd listen. I heard Elvin Jones playing drums, he played with the energy, I guess you call it, of Detroit. He was, even on Speak No Evil, he's at top energy level that you could be and still match up there. For Elvin, he's being somewhat restrained, but he's still got more energy. And at 19, I could relate to that energy. Then Herbie Hancock could be coming out of the left speaker, and I could tell at that point he knew more about harmony than he was 26 or something when he recorded that out. But you could just see he was advanced and a schooled, smart musician, and in addition to being a soulful artist. And I could relate to that. Yeah, I'm a smart guy. I can relate to these guys. But it was Wayne who really spoke to me. And when I listened to his sax on that album, I didn't hear a horn. I didn't hear reeds. I didn't hear fingers moving. I heard a guy talking to me. He played always, all his life, I think, and right up to the end, played in a conversational manner. He was telling a story, and the storytelling was clear cut. You could see that he was kind of like telling me how to like maneuver. Like we were walking down the street together, And he was saying, don't make eye contact with this guy here. Just keep going straight. Now, maybe we should cross the street here. He was telling me how to get through life and life's ups and downs. There was something soothing in his advice. By the time I got to the end of side 2 was my side that I would play, I could remember what my hopes and dreams were. I was back on track. What did I set out to do? Why did I move to Ann Arbor? What am I doing now? I became aware that was really a moderately noble calling, right? To make music, to be part of making music that could help people who were going off the rails get back on. The power of Speak No Evil is that album still works for me. I'm 72. If I have a rough day at the Blue Note office and I'm driving home in traffic across LA, if I put on side 2 of Speak No Evil, I'm good. By the time I get home, I'm okay. So that set me on a course. I thought, I'm going to make those kind of records that mean something to people and have as much fun in the process as I can. I don't want to make it sound like record producers are like Joan of Arc or anything. It was fun. The studios are a cool place to spend your time. Making records is one of the biggest kicks you're ever going to get in life. But I set out on a path to do that. I was playing bars in Detroit. It came slowly. It was tough learning in Detroit because there were just a couple of good engineers there and they weren't sharing their secrets. And it wasn't like today where you could make a record in your laptop. They didn't have laptops. So you had to have, $500,000 to build a studio, and you had to have money to rent a studio. But ultimately, I calmed my way into a few places, and I was able to learn how to make records. And I thought we were making them in the great tradition of Detroit music. Detroit was an interesting town, still is, but in the 50s and 60s, when I was growing up, people came from all over the world with their cultures, to work in the auto factories. And they not only brought their families, but they brought their music with them. And you could hear music everywhere, and you could have different kinds of food everywhere. It was like an international fair, 24 hours a day. And eventually that music kind of melds together. And in Detroit, it melded together a certain way, I think, because the whole city was a one industry town. My parents were both school teachers, but if auto sales went down, they'd lay off workers, they'd move away to find work, and they'd take their families, and now there were fewer kids in school. So teachers would get laid off, barbers would get laid off, and waitresses would get laid off. That kind of environment makes for a really honest population. There's no point in putting on any airs, no point in renting a Mercedes to impress your friends. They're not going to be impressed. They know that you're just like them and that your fate is tied in a way that you can't control to the auto business. So the music that comes from Detroit reflects that kind of honesty. It's really without sheen. It's the opposite of slick. Even the slick stuff, like Motown was kind of slick music. It was pop music. It was in the pop charts. But really, if you listen to those records, they don't sound like New York. They don't sound like LA. They don't sound like Chicago. They're pretty raw sounding. And it's a wildly individualized set of musicians. They have those musicians play with a unique personality, the Funk Brothers, right? Led by this crazy bass player who was not only playing holding down, the root of the thing, or was so brilliant at coming up with alternate notes to play, but he was playing melodically. He was providing melodic counterpoint. And he was like a percussionist too. But he was doing 3 or 4 things at once. He was an incredible musician. So that already is different from every group of session musicians that are making. I'm not saying they're, I love Chuck Rainey. I love those guys. The session players, Carol Kay, incredible. James Jamerson, and no one's going to argue with you on that point. He was just a unique guy. So he's just him fronting the band alone. And then they're mostly the local jazz musicians who were playing R&B. They were listening to what was going on in the big cities like New York and LA and kind of getting it wrong. And in the process, they came up with something raw and fantastic.
Let's put some music into this. After we have the picture, we can imagine ourselves. Here's Detroit, and that first track we're going to listen to, Nubian Lady, is Detroit based. This is Yusuf Lateef, and let's just get in that groove, and then we'll keep chatting more, because I want to get deeper into that. That's pretty amazing. So here is a track featuring our guest today, which is Don Moss on bass. This is called Nubian Lady. a track entitled Nubian Lady, and it featured my guest today, Don Was, on bass. And we've been starting to talk about Detroit and the legacy, and this is an endless, bottomless topic that we can talk about. And I actually got to play the Detroit Jazz Festival this year, and it was so exciting.
Oh, you did, really? It's a great festival, isn't it?
Oh, it's wonderful. It was such an honor to go there. It was part of our release tour for the Shiros.
Oh, fantastic.
I don't know, but I think I felt something in the air.
Well, you can feel the city and you can feel the people, because it's the one festival that's free. So you're not looking at like auto executives who would go see the Chinese acrobats as well as the jazz artists just as easily. You got real jazz fans that you can see in the front rows, and you get to see the real people of Detroit, not just the people who can afford a pricey picnic basket ticket,
And, we started talking about producing and some of the legacy musicians. I mean, you have like 6 Grammy Awards for albums you produce, so much more. So I want to talk a little bit about your role as a producer. The album we just produced, we had Lenny White in the studio, and it was interesting. He gave us input, but it was very different, and some producers are very hands-on. They go, yeah, you should put this and this and this on. Some even arrange, and some are just like, this sounds good. So how do you approach it for producing?
My overall feeling is that you help the artist realize a vision that they have by whatever means necessary. And it varies from artist to artist. A producer named Jimmy Iovine once gave me some advice. He said, never produce an artist that you mind losing every argument to. Meaning that if you don't trust the artist and their instincts enough to lose your arguments with them, then you don't have enough faith in the artist, and you shouldn't be making the record. You should work with. So that's kind of what I try to do. I like to work with people who already come with a vision and the ability to communicate that vision. There's some great producers who are auteur producers. I can think of like Daniel Lanois being one. A lot of the hip hop producers are like that. But Babyface was a producer. He still is a producer like that, where they write the songs, they play all the instruments. They'll even tell you how you, the singer, even if you're the featured artist and a well-known artist, they'll tell you how to phrase the lines. So they're really more of the artist, maybe in some cases, than the artist is. I personally don't like making those kind of records. If I wanted to I can make my own records if I want to make my own records. What I like doing is working alongside really brilliant people and learning from them. The thrill is in watching them work and just being supportive. Sometimes just shrugging your shoulders and saying, yeah, that was a great take. I love it. It's good. Let's move on. Sometimes that's really good producing. You don't have to create a struggle where it's not necessary. But if people are stumped, it's not great, and you don't know how to move it forward, that's when you have to become more active. It's different with every single artist. Some artists I've worked with don't really take great umbrage at other people, even people that they've hired to do it, having other people suggest artistic moves. They find it invasive. I've done a number of records where I'm just the foil for somebody, where I'll come up with an idea and they'll say no. To get past my idea, it forces them to stretch and come up with a better idea. So I've done whole albums where no one took my advice ever, but I was just something to make them, just to show how much better they were than me. They would come up with a better idea. And that's a legitimate way of producing a record, is to agitate someone into coming up with something brilliant by whatever means necessary. Prefer not to do that. Prefer just have a nice vibe. And we usually do. I can't think of many tense moments in a studio that I've had. They're mostly fun. You can smell trouble coming from a mile away. You just say, no, just don't do the record.
And you're right. There's a lot about instincts. You can sense from very early on if something's going in the right direction. But it just helps having those extra ears. So somebody saying, yep, this was a good take. And you're okay.
Just to say, you got it. Move on. That's an important role. Just to keep the vibe nice. I consider that to be one of the most important things I do, is keep it fun and relaxed and try to get as much of the stress out of the situation as you can and make people comfortable to take chances. It's okay you can jump off that cliff. I got you here, just jump, man. Let's see what happens.
So we have a track coming up that's called Can't Wait Till I Get Home. Movie horn track. Can you give us a little background?
I should mention that this is my band, my new band, the Pan-Detroit Ensemble, and we just started touring this year. What happened with this band, my dear old friend Terrence Blanchard called me about 2.5 years ago, and he was curating a concert series jazz-related thing for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. And since I was from Detroit, he said, "You want to do one of the nights?" I said, "Yeah, sure." But I didn't have a band together or anything. So I got some people who I played, some of them I played with for 45 years. Like there's a Blue Note artist named David McMurray, who I've been playing with since the 70s, and a keyboard player named Luis Resta, who I've been playing with. He's 60. I've been playing with him since he was a teenager. I got 9 people together in a room who I thought would be good for this gig. And we started playing. It just felt comfortable from the first second. And that was because one of the things I've learned as a producer and as a record company president is that the greatest mistake producers or record companies make is to get involved with artists that they dig and then try to turn them into whatever's fashionable in that moment. It rarely works. It even more rarely does it work in the long run. You usually kind of bring someone's creative process to a halt by doing that. So I always felt your best shot is to take the thing that makes you the most different from everybody else and treat that as your superpower. By the time I was 40, I'd worked with all my heroes. I'd been in the studio with the Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan and Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson and Brian Wilson. These are some of the greatest songwriters of all time, right? And I'd sit down to write a song and I think, well, what's the point of this, man? When Brian Wilson's living a mile away, he should write it, why do a Brian Wilson song? It gave me writer's block for a number of years until I finally thought, all right, you know something? All right, you can't be Brian Wilson. You can't be Willie Nelson. But Willie Nelson and Brian Wilson, they didn't grow up in Detroit in the 50s and 60s. They didn't have the Stooges play at their high school. They didn't have George Clinton and the Parliaments play a sock hop in 9th grade, which they did at my junior high school. They didn't drop acid and go see the MC5 and see and taste this wall of sound that they created. Just be yourself. The thing that makes me different from most people making records today is that I come from Detroit in that era. Right. Not too many people left from that time who are actively making records today. So we put a band together that looked and sounded like Detroit, and everything just fit together. And what we're going to play now is a Henry Threadgill song. Henry Threadgill's a Chicago guy, I think, originally. Always admired him because he refused to acknowledge genre, the way in which categorization restricts you. And he blew out the boundaries every time he set foot anywhere near an instrument. This is from the first rehearsal, actually. We rehearsed in the studio for the first day. And I said, yeah, let's try this Henry Threadgill song. And this was it. It was just one pass. This was just to see if we could place. But you can hear it.
Well, let's have a listen. Yeah, lots of bluesy Chicago influence, but way beyond that. Yep. This is Can't Wait Till I Get Home, a new track from my guest today, Don Voss, who you'll also hear on bass. was the track entitled Can't Wait Till I Get Home, a Henry Threadgill composition. That's also part of the repertoire of a new band by my guest today, Don Was, who I have the treat to talk to today. We talked a little bit about producing, but yeah, let's talk about the other hand, heading up a record label and none other than Blue Note since 2011. I mean, that must have been quite a challenging task to take on, and especially 2011 at a time where labels weren't thriving, and this is very different from the original Blue Note. So maybe share a little bit what it took to take on that legacy and what it took in terms of leadership too.
My goal in life up until that moment, I was 58 years old in 2011. My goal in life had been to get through it without having to work. And I never considered making records or playing music to be work. I'd done it free. That doesn't mean I didn't put in a lot of time and effort, but it was fun. But this was a job now someone was offering me. So in some ways it represented surrender. And I wouldn't have done it except that it was Blue Note. And I've been collecting Blue Note records since 1966. I had no skills, no knowledge, no management skills, no business skills. I didn't know how to read, a spreadsheet, it was like, and I knew I was going to have to learn this. My biggest concern, if you want to know the truth, was that you have a finite number of synapses in your brain that you can keep active at any given time. When you don't actively use those synapses, they grow dormant and they shut down. Doesn't mean they can't be reactivated, but it takes a lot of repetition to reactivate. So I thought, well, I'm going to learn how to manage people. I'm going to learn how a business works. I'm going to learn how to read a profit and loss spreadsheet, but it's going to come at a price. I'm going to have to close something down, and it's probably going to be on the creative side. Like I may never write a song again, but I'll learn to do this. But it seemed worth it. I wasn't that good a songwriter anyway. It was high adventure. I had to follow on the heels of a man named Bruce Lundvall, who was
remember Bruce.
He was a lovely, lovely man, loved music, loved musicians, came down on the side of the musicians, probably the most beloved record executive of all time. And really good at the job. He'd been doing it a long time. He'd been president of Columbia Records. He'd been, he ran a label at Elektra for a while. And he was the kind of guy who would return your phone call within a minute or two, answer an email within like 30 seconds. So now I have to follow him. It took about 5 years to learn how to run a company effectively, but do it in a way that suited my personality, which is different from Bruce's, even though we share the same birthday. We're kind of he was older than me, but September 13th, we considered that like to be destiny, that I was hired to do this thing. But it took a while, but I feel good about it now. And I'm proud of the people who work at the company. And I'm proud of the artists who are signed to the label and the records that they're making. I would stack this year up against any year in the company's history. As far as our 85th anniversary, we're putting out 70 records this year, 50 of them high quality audiophile vinyl reissues from the catalog, and 20 of them are albums of new music that range from Wayne Shorter's first posthumous album that it's part of a series that he hand curated, to Charles Lloyd's album, which The Sky Will Still Be There Tomorrow. It won Charles Lloyd this year. He won the Downbeat Critics and Readers poll for Album of the Year, Artist of the Year, Tenor Saxophonist of the Year, and Flautist of the Year. And the Critics poll, they put him in the Hall of Fame as well. He's like 86 or 87 years old playing. I've been a fan of Charles since the mid 70s. I think he made the best record he ever made. But in addition to guys like that, we have artists like Joel Ross out of Chicago, made this incredible, this is his third album for the label called New Blues. Emmanuel Wilkins, just in the next month or so, will be releasing a new album called Blues Blood that'll blow your mind. These are young leaders who I know are going to be important musicians. I know people are going to be listening to Joel Ross, going to see him. He'll be like Herbie. He'll be 80 years old, and he'll still be out there playing. Same with Emmanuel. Bill Frisell.
Walter Smith.
Yeah. I'm glad. Thank you. That's good. I'm glad you mentioned. Yeah, Walter just made an awesome album, and he's such a wonderful, creative guy to work with. It's a real thrill, and he made a great record. 3 of us are from Houston, and Ruben Is Not was the title of it. Yeah, we got 20 records, 20 new albums this year.
Very cool. Very cool.
So I feel like we're firing on all cylinders now.
I would say so. Well, yeah, let's celebrate this anniversary year far and wide. And we're going
Yes.
to listen to a track, I Ain't Got Nothing But Time.
Right.
So, which is ironic. I bet your
Yes.
time is pretty limited during the day. Let's dive right in. So, this is
Okay,
I Ain't
good.
Got Nothing But Time from new music created by my guest today, Don Was.
life is still worthwhile. But if you took the time to look, oh, my number, oh, is in the book. 'Cause I ain't got nothing but time, baby. I ain't got nothing but time. I ain't got nothing but time, baby. You can call me anytime. You can dial, you can dial, you can dial, you can dial my number. You can dial my number. Oh, I said get on your dance shoes. I said get on your dancing shoes. You can dial, you can dial, you can dial my number. You can dial my number. You can dial, you can dial. Hey, put on your dancing shoes. Put on your dancing shoes. Yeah.
This was a track entitled I Ain't Got Nothing But Time. And we're talking to Don
You know,
Moss.
that was a Hank Williams song.
And that was a Hank Williams song. Very important to add
Yes.
that. So we went a lot of directions and
Yeah,
covered all the different hats. And I love what you said, about sharing the birthday with Bruce Lundwall. I always think I share a birthday with Jerry Allen and Chick Corea, and I think that's
Really?
the greatest
Wow.
thing,
Ooh,
right? So I'm supposed
yeah.
to be a piano player. There's something about that. And we talked about, Detroit and where you come from, filtering in. Give us a little glimpse of what's coming up, what's next. So you'll be playing maybe more music. What's in the future here?
I'm sticking with this band. I like this band a lot.
Yay, that's
We just finished a West Coast run that included SF Jazz, 2 nights there, and we played the
Great.
Monterey Jazz Festival, which is the first time I played there. I've been there a number of times, but first time I was actually performing there, and that was kind of a bucket list thing for me. And we're booking stuff for next year. We're playing next February. We're going to go to Asia at the end of May and Europe next summer. I like this band. I'm 72. I'm going to have this band till I drop. I'm determined, man, to practicing and becoming a better bass player. I mean, as president of Blue Note, maybe I'm not supposed to say that that's one of my most important goals is to become a better bass player, but I feel like I'm just starting to get a handle on it. I took a couple of lessons from Ron Carter. He showed me some things that were mind-blowing. There's stuff you learn everywhere. I was talking about what I learned from Ron Carter with Michelle Indegiacello, who's also a Blue Note artist. Made an incredible record this year.
Yes, I just listened to it.
It's a powerful record, man. She's also a great bass player. So I was talking about what Ron Carter. We're just talking about little nuanced things like when you release a note, how long do you hold the note for? Ron Carter told me I was blurring my notes. So he gave me some exercises to do to make each one have its own life. And I was talking to her about how long you let the note live for. And she just happened to mention that she released the note in rhythm with the hi-hat cymbal. Like, that's why I say I wish I'd have stayed in school, because maybe I would have learned this 40 years ago. But I'd never thought about releasing the note being as important to the rhythm as attacking the note. And that kind of blew my mind. So for 6 months of playing, I'm working on that. I played a gig with George Porter from the Meters the other day. We were just talking about, again, the same thing, releasing notes and leaving space. He said Alan Toussaint used to tell him, don't play on the 2. Leave the 2 open. Let the snare drum speak on the backbeat. Just leave 2 open. So, that's interesting. I'll try that. So, and then I'd heard people like Bootsy talking about ending the phrase on the 1. Just come play whatever you want in the bar, but come down on the 1. So now you come down on the 1 and take a rest, take a breath on 2. So I started doing that on this last tour with Pan-Detroit Ensemble. And what I found is that in that 1 beat, it allowed other people to fill that space that I was filling, right? So someone would move into the 2 that wouldn't have played there if I was filling it up. It gave me a breath to see where I could tell where they were headed next. So I could realign what I was going to play in the next bar to, I was responding to what they started on the 2. That was like a huge breakthrough. These are tiny nuances, but every one of them is like a little universe. It's like your own, it's like getting a bunch of different Mount Everest to climb. And it keeps it incredibly interesting. But I want to get better in the time I have left for my fingers to be working well. Even if I'm alive and playing in my 80s, will my fingers work as well as they do at 72? Probably not. So time's of the essence. I want to play as much as I can.
I hear you. And that's the great thing about being a musician, that yes, it's a Mount Everest, but you always have something to strive for and to learn for. Sometimes I see others waiting for the retirement, and then we'll sit there. It will never happen to us musicians. You'll always be growing, and that's the really special part. So I so appreciate you taking the time and sharing
Monika,
today. That's really special. And I hope you come to Vienna and play at the Porgy and Bess with the Pan-Detroit Ensemble. And
good.
I shall be there.
Nice, good. I look forward to seeing you.
I saw Charles Lloyd there just a few
really?
days
Wow,
ago when he was playing there. Yep, it was a great concert.
I'll call my agent today. We'll see if we...
Great. Yeah, so we'll have You Asked, I Came, but I assume this was also from the performance or the rehearsal.
You Asked, I Came is from a performance. I'm not sure which performance you have.
So we'll listen definitely to You Asked, I Came. This is the Pan-Detroit Ensemble by my guest today, Don Was. Don, thanks again for everything, and best of luck, and have tons of fun with that.
Thank you very much, Monika. Good to see you.
Thank you for listening to Talking Jazz. My guest today was bassist, producer, Blue Note label executive Don Was.
You can hear Talking Jazz every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Mondays at 7 p.m. on WETF 105.7 in South Bend, Indiana, or online at jazzradiowetf.org, and Fridays at 8 p.m. on WICR 88.7 Indianapolis. Previous shows are also on my YouTube channel, Monika Herzig, MonikaHerzig. Please subscribe to the Talking Jazz playlist. Thank you for listening.